Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and so we have a bit of a story today that kind of hurts my soul a little bit. I mean, we all know that PlayStation has had some live service ambitions these past few years, and even though they've received a lot of criticism for that shift, especially on my channel, there are a few Sony franchises that I think fans would be very excited about, including myself. However, Sony may not have as much love for these games as we do, and yeah, we'll talk about that today. Also, the Switch 2's most mysterious feature leaked out a little bit early, and we actually got some more info out of this as well. I mean, who would have guessed? You know, this has only been the most leaked console of all time by this point. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's just go and get right into things, though, starting off with the Batman Arkham series developed by Rocksteady. I know fans have a lot of love for this series, and, you know, they're often viewed as some of, if not the very best, superhero games ever made. Really, I'd say it's between it and Insomniac's Spider-Man. I mean, you really can't go wrong with either or, but if you are a fan of the Batman Arkham series developed by Rocksteady, then you might be happy to know that Rocksteady is reportedly returning to the Batman franchise once again. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a part of the Arkham series, but this is according to Bloomberg, and I feel like a part of this is exciting. I mean, this is the announcement that fans wanted to hear, 10 years ago after the release of Batman Arkham Knights. Instead, we got a live service game that would take them 8 years to develop, and it ultimately flopped. So I think that's where the concern seeps in. This is almost a BioWare type of situation in the sense that historically, Rocksteady, they're a good studio, and they're going to work on a franchise that they're known for. But because it's been just such a long time between releases, do they even have the same people that made the previous games great in the first place? Something that I've learned over the years is that great teams make great games, not studio names, if that makes any sense. What I'll say here, though, is that I am hopeful that they've learned their lessons and that they will make a Batman experience that fans truly deserve. Now, we also got an update for the previously teased Wonder Woman game developed by Warner Brothers. Now, unfortunately, if you're looking forward to that game, you might as well just go ahead and sit tight. It's gonna be a long time before we get it in our hands. This is also according to Bloomberg, as they reported this. One of the company's biggest bets in development, a video game based on Wonder Woman, has struggled to coalesce, according to people familiar with the project. Early last year, it was rebooted and switched directors. Not a great sign. The game has already cost more than $100 million to make, said the people who asked not to be identified, discussing non-public information, and is still years away from release, if it ever makes it to market. So, that's not necessarily a big vote of confidence, and right away, this is yet another example of just how ridiculous AAA publishers are. I mean, the fact that they've already spent $100 million, and it's still years away, this is probably only a fraction of what they're going to spend, and that means that they're going to have to sell 5, 6, 7 million copies just to make it worth it. And I don't know what type of reach Wonder Woman has, but that's a lot to expect for really any franchise to sell, especially for one that doesn't necessarily have a profound history in gaming. So what I did is that I looked up the highest grossing Marvel-based films. Her movie ranked at number 26, and I also looked up the most successful comic book series as well, and she wasn't on that list at all. So I do question if they can make this a profitable endeavor, but that's modern AAA development anymore. They just pump so much money into these games, and they just think every licensed IP is going to be a gold mine, and then they just kind of wonder why they can't reach internal expectations. I'll tell you right now, it's because your budgets are out of control. Now, I do have some good news as well, and that's for you Wario fans out there. I mean, you all have been living the good life here in the last few years with games like Pizza Tower and Anton Blast, but now you can also play the game that inspired them. Yeah, that's right. Nintendo listened, because Wario Land 4 will be available on Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack starting on February 14th. to kind of describe this game, though, it's more or less a puzzle platformer with, I'd say, a bit of chaos thrown in. I would definitely recommend it. It's bizarre, it's unique, and it's very creative. It's a very different type of platformer than what you see elsewhere, but it is really good. And honestly, I'd like to see Nintendo revisit this franchise with a new entry down the road. In the meantime, though, I'm just happy that more people will get the experience to play Wario Land 4. Okay, so let's go and talk about PlayStation and what could have been. Yeah, so Insomniac's Ted Price recently retired, and during an interview with Kinda Funny Games, they asked him about his favorite game that he pitched that wasn't greenlit. And unfortunately, it was a sad response for us Resistance fans. He said, yeah, I'll share one, Resistance 4. Yeah, you might have just heard my heart break a little bit there, but he continued. We did pitch that one, and it was a wonderful concept, and it just, in terms of timing and market opportunity, didn't work out. But it was a result of a lot of Insomniac team members being passionate about extending the story further, because I do believe that Resistance has set up a really cool alternate history base where anything can happen with the Chimera and where they go and what their origins are. And I completely agree with him here. I feel like the world of Resistance was just so fascinating, and it had a lot more to offer. I mean, the Chimera, in my opinion, is one of the most iconic enemies in a PlayStation franchise. I still remember when I first saw the iconic Chimera skull on the PlayStation 3 box art, and it just immediately grabbed me. It's actually one of my favorite box arts ever made, and I think overall it has a good story throughout its original trilogy, especially the third game. I thought the third game story was really, really good. However, from Sony's perspective, I do also understand that Resistance didn't really achieve what they wanted it to do. You know, back then, Sony was searching for a Halo killer. And that's how we got PS3 exclusives like Killzone, Resistance, and if any of you actually remember this, Haze. Yeah, that was a thing as well. Not necessarily a good thing, but Killzone and Resistance were genuinely really good franchises. They didn't exactly sell quite as well as Sony maybe hoped for, but from a quality standpoint, I think they did a good job, and I think a lot of PS3 fans have fond memories of those franchises. So it's unfortunate, but even without it, you know, Sony still had a lot of success with the PlayStation 4, and they eventually acquired Insomniac years later, and they also had a lot of success together with the Spider-Man series. So it's hard to fault Sony too much here. In terms of their business, they made a lot of really good moves between 2010 and 2020. But what I'll also say is that while I can't fault them for that decision, let's say a decade ago, I do, however, question their decision these past few years. I mean, Herman Holst and Jim Ryan, they greenlit all these failed live service projects. They went out and acquired the studio that made Concord, and they gave them hundreds of millions of dollars to make that game. And they acquired Haven for Fair Games. And, I mean, I've seen zero excitement for that game thus far. And the reason I bring that up is because I feel like Sony actually has a few franchises that would generate excitement among their fan base. Resistance, Killzone, Fat Princess, though, you know, okay, that probably would face a lot of scrutiny in today's society. But then there's also the SOCOM franchise. These games immediately comes to mind. So even though they turned down a Resistance 4 back in the day, I feel like now it kind of actually makes some sense for their new live service strategy. But hey, you know, that's just my 2 cents. I guess it is what it is, but I hope we get a Resistance eventually down the road. And hey, just kind of as a bonus, with Sony's push for game-to-movie adaptations, I actually feel like Resistance could fit into that plan as well. Now, one last thing before we go, Nintendo seemingly leaked the most mysterious Switch 2 feature that everybody seems to be speculating about, even though I don't really think there's actually much to speculate about. I mean, I think the Switch 2, for the most part, has been as expected. It looks like a Switch, but it's more powerful and it's bigger. Now, that's what most people want. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there was one little tease that they revealed in their reveal trailer, and that was what appears to be a mouse-like feature. Well, a new patent has now basically confirmed it. This was discovered on Patent Scope, and it has some different illustrations and everything, but you can just read its description here. It says, this input device comprises a front surface, an upper surface, a first side surface, a second side surface, a direction input unit, a first upper surface button. Yeah, there's a lot of surfaces here, but here's the big part, and a sensor for mouse operation. So there you go. If there was any reason not to believe that they were teasing a mouse in that reveal trailer, this pretty much 100% answers that question. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Nintendo incorporates this into their first-party games. I'm sure they're going to do some fun stuff with it, but even for third-party, RTS games and first-person shooters immediately comes to mind. They are more accurate than a mouse, so, this could be an unexpected advantage for the Nintendo Switch, and I think it's going to draw some attention to the Switch 2 from third-party studios. I think the more curious part about this patent, though, is unrelated to the mouse-like feature. Again, I feel like their previous teaser from Nintendo was pretty straightforward, but however, there was an illustration in this patent that showcased a controller that was split into two. Now, a lot of people are speculating that this is their Pro controller, but I'm not necessarily convinced that's actually the case. I mean, you have to remember that patent illustrations don't necessarily represent the final products. And the idea of a Pro controller is to have a controller that feels, like a traditional controller. But let me know what you all think about this in the comments below. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, do you view the Steam Deck and their possible new Steam machine as consoles or PCs? And the results here were very split between the two, and this kind of takes me back to what I've been saying. PC gaming has been blurring the lines of what a console is, thanks to things like the Steam Deck and even the ROG Ally to some extent. I mean, if you've played the Steam Deck, it feels like a console experience, just with a little bit more user control. So theoretically, these Steam machines could actually attract the console audience, and I think that's exactly what Valve is trying to do. They want more people on their storefront, and the console audience is a perfect consumer for them. I mean, they have Xbox games, they have PlayStation games, they have emulation, and yeah, their store is pretty awesome as well. So I like what Valve is doing here. I think this is a really smart move by them, and it actually sounds like Xbox is doing something maybe similar with their next console as well. So PCs, consoles, they're kind of intertwining a little bit by this point. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.